The Pittsburgh Pirates made a slew of roster moves at the end of the season. What do they mean for the future, and why now?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans just like you. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Book today on Booking.com on their website or in the Booking.com app if you're looking for some vacations, maybe to go see a football game, maybe to go see a basketball game, maybe to go see family. Make sure you use Booking.com. And welcome back. Tuesday, September 24th. Pirates begin play this week, their final week of baseball now in the year 2024. A losing season already clinched. And today, Pirates made some roster moves, folks. I'm very interested in why this happened, but we'll talk about all this here in a minute. As Michael A. Taylor, well, I kind of saw that one coming because he wasn't going to be back next year. I'll just not even bury the lead on that one for you, for all of you. Michael A. Taylor gets designated for assignment, and Rowdy Tellez also designated for assignment in a late roster move that also sees Liover Peguero and Joshua Palacios come back up to the Major League roster. Peguero, pretty good, decent season. I wouldn't say he's done anything overly exceptional, I think would be the word. He hasn't had the strongest season in the minor leagues this year, but by all accounts, he hasn't had a bad season either. He finishes first among all Pirates minor leaguers this season in hits with 127, RBIs with 79, doubles, and tied for total bases and second in extra base hits. So spends most of his time in Indianapolis this year. Liover Peguero, a guy that I've talked about on this show quite a bit, seeing as that he's going to be going into his fourth year on the 40-man roster. So he is a guy that you need to kind of figure out what you're doing with. We don't really know where Liover Peguero fits into the mold here with this Pittsburgh Pirates team moving forward, especially with the middle infield kind of getting cluttered up now with Nick Gonzalez, Jared Triolo, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and then eventually, of course, a Termarr Johnson, who's going to be coming down the pipe as well. So interesting to see that. And then Palacios on the same coin. I don't really know how much of a future Joshua Palacios really has on this team. Now, Joshua Palacios, of course, a guy, brings the vibes, great guy, have had him on the show. Please go find that episode from last year if you can find it when we had Joshua Palacios on the show. It was me and Craig Toth of Bucks in the Basement, where we talked to Joshua Palacios about what was working for him and what was going to continue working for him moving forward. And he jokingly, and probably one of the best answers I've ever been given in an interview, said that it was all because of putting contacts in instead of wearing glasses at the plate. So he comes back, final week of the season, and some news, of course, comes out about Rowdy Tellez specifically with this move, that Rowdy Tellez was slated to be getting a $200,000 bonus if he reached 425 plate appearances. He's at 421. Take that how you will. I'm not going to break down if that was the reason why the Pirates did that or not, because I truthfully don't know. Does it look sleazy? Does it look kind of suspicious? Yes, considering there is a game tonight, and if he would have played, the chances of him getting 4 plate appearances are pretty high. And yeah, that's interesting, to say the least, that they would do that. Now, what I think this move signifies as far as the future holds is, specifically with Rowdy Tellez, we'll stick with it from a getting away from the bonus standpoint. Rowdy Tellez was a guy that started the season absolutely horribly. I mean, there was no worse start that Rowdy Tellez could have had to his 2024 campaign, especially considering the Pirates were bringing him in about a year and a half, 2 years removed from when he was just hitting everything out of the baseball park. And then he just really didn't do much. But the Pirates decided to hold on to him throughout the summer. He just got better. He started hitting the ball. He actually was hitting lefties pretty well at certain points of the season. He was a big reason why the Pirates were kind of over 500 going into the All-Star break because of the efforts that he had at first base. Defensively, I thought he did a lot better at first base than what I initially expected from him when they did sign him. But really, when you're getting rid of Rowdy Tellez and Michael A. Taylor at this stage, this basically just signifies that neither of these guys are going to be back next year, which makes you wonder how things are going to shake out. With Michael A. Taylor's departure, I don't think you're as worried about that because of O'Neal Cruz moving from shortstop to center field. That's a big component to all of this because Michael A. Taylor, one, just did not hit the baseball whatsoever this year. And yes, the guy has phenomenal defensive prowess and is one of the best defensive center fielders in all of baseball, but you're not going to keep a guy like that around when he's just barely hitting below the Mendoza line, if not hitting below it. So now you move O'Neal Cruz over there where he's in the midst of having his first 2020 campaign of his career. That should be the baseline for what we should expect from O'Neal Cruz throughout the rest of his career. And Michael A. Taylor, you just don't really need him, especially when you have a guy like Joshua Palacios, who you're going to have to make a decision on. You're looking at Billy Cook as a potential option in the outfield next year. You still have to wonder what's going on with Jack Sawinski and where he fits into the future of this team. You look at Brian De La Cruz. Do they even tender him a contract this offseason after trading for him, virtually trading nothing for him, mind you, to the Miami Marlins? But these are all things that come from this roster move. Is Michael A. Taylor's makes more sense. Rowdy Tellez, I mean, we've heard me discuss what's gone on with this team at first base. We've seen a report that Brian Reynolds has been working on infield drills and maybe making a move to first base next season. That would solve that problem, but then create another problem in the corner outfield where instead of one, you might need two corner outfielders. And that leaves a hole at first base now. Connor Joe is still under team control for quite a while, but Connor Joe, I just don't know if he can be consistent enough offensively to play first base. And you could still use him as a corner outfielder as well. And I kind of prefer him as a corner outfielder. Now, in the beginning of the season, obviously he had to be the first baseman because they just did not have another option because of how bad Rowdy Tellez was playing. So you consider all that and you say, okay, well, if we're going to move our best offensive player, arguably outside of O'Neal Cruz and Brian Reynolds, over to first base, well, that's him learning a new position. That's him learning a whole new fabric of the defensive game in Major League Baseball. Yes, it would fix that position for you, but you've heard me on this show talk about the domino effect that would have, seeing as you already have questions in right field with Brian De La Cruz and Jack Sawinski. You probably don't want to create another corner outfield question with left field, although first base is a lot more limited as far as what is out there in free agency, at least on the surface, versus what is out there for corner outfielders like Tyler O'Neill and Anthony Santander, who can both play those positions and are going to be available in free agency as unrestricted free agents. So I understand the potential of moving Reynolds over there. I understand why this move was made. I just kind of question the timing. Why didn't you just ride out the last 6 games and then make this decision? Because making this decision does virtually nothing for you. I mean, it just signifies that you're designating Rowdy Tellez and Michael A. Taylor for assignment. But at the end of the day, if you weren't going to keep them, why didn't you do this a month and a half or 2 months or like a month and a half ago? When seemingly, I get it, you were still in it. But Michael A. Taylor, I never understood Billy Cook, I think, should have been up here way sooner than he was and just taken Michael A. Taylor's spot on the roster, or even a Joshua Palacios, who, mind you, again, you have to get answers on this year because you eventually have to, because he's running out of minor league options, if I'm not mistaken. Fact check me on that if you need to. But there was no real point in keeping a guy like Michael A. Taylor around. Rowdy Tellez, I understood it a little bit. He was playing a lot better through the summer. He was showing signs of life. But if you weren't going to keep him, why waste your time? That's more of why I'm kind of thrown off by this whole thing. I understand the premise. I understand why. I just don't understand the reasoning behind why this is the time to do it. I understand why they are doing it, because if you're not bringing them back next year, what's the point? I just don't understand the timing. But these are moves that the Pirates have made. These are moves that we will have to monitor, and we'll see what Liover Peguero and Joshua Palacios can offer in this final week of the season for the Pittsburgh Pirates, as Rowdy Tellez and Michael A. Taylor appear to be out the door. Next, Ke'Bryan Hayes is out officially. We kind of already knew this. Out for the rest of 2024 and has set plans for 2025. We're going to talk about those plans, his offseason regimen that he wants to work on, and what his future holds on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by eBay Motors. Millions of parts for your MVP, and you can win every time with parts that fit your ride, because passion, drive, and patience are the formula for winning championships and also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts, and you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every day. Folks, after making this your first listen this afternoon/evening, make sure you listen to Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan, but please call him Sully. He's getting you ramped up for the playoffs as the final week of the MLB season is here. He's going to have all the coverage of all the races that are going on, the teams still in the fight, and the teams that have the best chance to win the World Series this year. So make sure you go check out Locked On MLB with Sully right now after you listen to this show. We'll be talking about the playoff picture in the final segment of today's show, because why not? We're probably going to do that all week because I think it's fun to look at. And if you're on YouTube, you probably see that the video paused there. Well, my cat decided she wanted to knock over a lampshade while I was talking about all of that stuff. But right now, we're going to talk about Ke'Bryan Hayes, one of my favorite players on the roster ever since I started the show. One of the biggest guys, really, on the team when I started the show in 2021. Never going to forget the memorable moment that he gave us whenever he hit that home run in Wrigley Field on opening day. Sadly gets hurt after that, and injuries have kind of been the story with Ke'Bryan Hayes ever since, especially with the back. And as it pertains to this, I mean, nobody, I think, is really shocked that Ke'Bryan Hayes is out for the remainder of the 2024 season. It was kind of a foregone conclusion whenever he headed to the IL with the back issues that he was having, that he was going to be done for the remainder of this year. And it does suck, because this is a guy that the Pirates have high hopes for. This is a guy that they've invested in, not only financially, but also in terms of just everything. I mean, financially, mentally, physically, emotionally, they've invested into this kid. He's a part of a lot of their promo packages. He's a part of pretty much everything you hear. And you see him on Sportsnet Pittsburgh every time with that cool intro video that they did this year. And now he's just been struggling with back issues. And when he spoke to MLB.com and Alex Stumpf. He said, just very disappointing for me just because, one, I just wanted to make the playoffs this year. Hayes said at Great American Ballpark on Sunday. And two, I just wanted to be out there. I want to be available every single day. And we saw this kind of start last season, and that's why we got a very good and long look at a guy in Jared Triolo, who had a pretty good year in 2023, and we've gotten another good long look at Jared Triolo because of these injuries. And he made that first trip to the injured list with back inflammation last year in This is Ke'Bryan Hayes. And this year, he's been out since August 19th. So nobody, again, really all that shocked about this. And you were hoping that he might be able to return, but this is just something that you really, really, really have to monitor. And Hayes, again, also said, I wouldn't say I was playing with it all year just because even whenever I've been able to stay on the field for quite some time, there have always been days where I feel okay, and then there are days where I feel terrible. It's just kind of the nature of the injury that I have. And this is an injury for Ke'Bryan Hayes that you don't mess with. I mean, back issues can plague careers. I mean, it can plague your life at this point, and especially with getting into your discs in your back. Not that I'm a medical professional or anything, but you don't want to mess with those. They are basically what holds your back together and is allowed what allows you to stay stable and be able to move without support. And if this is something that's going to plague Ke'Bryan Hayes for the rest of his career, then you have to wonder what the Pirates do at first or third base. And Hayes appears that he's going to be changing things a little bit in the offseason to attack this and battle this. He's been doing a rehab program in recent weeks. He's been playing catch. He's been doing light baseball activities. But according to this MLB.com story, he's going to get a bit more intense with a new rehab program. And this is different from what he's done in previous off seasons, as it's outlined, emphasizing more reps and building up his core to make sure he is in a good cardiovascular shape. So changing his rehab program a little bit to see if that works. And at this point, that's kind of what you got to do. I mean, you kind of just have to see what works when you're dealing with back injuries. You kind of have to see how this is going to all shape out for him. And what does the future hold for him? Really, it depends on his health. And even when he is healthy, he has to hit the baseball. Defensively, we know how good Ke'Bryan Hayes is defensively. We know he is a phenomenal defensive player. We know he will continue to be a phenomenal defensive player. He won a Gold Glove last year, obviously will not win it this season, but I have said it before and will say it again. I don't think that's going to be the only Gold Glove that Ke'Bryan Hayes wins in the entirety of his career, because he's just that good at the hot corner with the glove. But at the end of the day, the real value with him is going to come with, can he just be an average hitter in a lineup? Now, do I think he needed to be hitting third or first or second in the order? No. He needs to be a 5, 6, or 7 guy at best. I say at best, because that's who he is. He's going to get you, when he plays a full healthy season, if he can do that, he can prove to you that he can hit 10 to 15, maybe even 20 home runs with the power that he possesses. He lost some of that this year because of the back issues, but he can put the ball at all parts of the field. We've seen him do it before. We want to see him do it again. But the biggest question mark here is the health. Now, a lot of people will say the contract, this contract, that. I'm not worried about that right now. I'm worried about seeing if he can come back from this, show us a little bit of what we saw at the end of 2023 when we really had high hopes for him going into this year because of that strong second half that he had last season when he came back from the IL. And let's see how that goes. But monitoring his back is going to be the biggest thing. And hearing him say that he just wants to make the playoffs and be out there and help the team, that's what you want from a guy that you extended for 8 years. That's what you want from a guy that's been a quiet leader on this team, a guy who's been a part of the core that you started with 4 or 5 years ago. This is what you want. And let's hope that the future holds good things for Ke'Bryan Hayes. But we have to acknowledge the injury history. you have to acknowledge that this could be and will likely be a problem moving forward, which in turn creates a problem for the Pittsburgh Pirates at third base. And if that happens, then you'll start seeing, and you may or may not see an offseason signing this offseason that signifies how the Pirates think about that currently right now. There are some teams, though, that aren't thinking about the offseason because they are in the middle of a wild card race. I figured let's look at the playoff picture because why not? Playoffs are almost here. Playoff baseball is so fun. And I'm going to give some quick thoughts about it because all week we're going to look at this throughout the entire week. And I have some thoughts. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Book today on Booking.com, on the site or in the Booking.com app, because this episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. So book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. With Booking.com's wide variety of choices across the United States, you can go incognito to all your baseball rival cities. If you're a rival fan listening to this show, maybe, I don't know, a Cleveland Guardians fan, you can head wherever you need to go this postseason to catch a baseball game. They want their team to win, but is also excited to check out, who knows, maybe you want to find some new food in a new city. Maybe you want to meet some new people. You can do all of that on Booking.com right now because the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you head to FanDuel.com right now because NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Paul Skeens again, the favorite to win Rookie of the Year on FanDuel.com. So if you want to get in on that action, make sure you go do it right now on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All righty, everybody, and welcome back to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Everydayers who listen to my show all the time, thank you for tuning in, as you always do. Very much appreciated because guess what? You're the best fans in the biz, and I love you for that so much. The playoffs are about here. They will be starting next week. You may or may not see me involved around the Locked On MLB podcast network as far as the playoffs are concerned. Going to be doing plenty of fun stuff with that. Obviously, for the Pirates, that means the player review series will start next week. It'll last about 2 to 3 weeks as it usually does. Going to do a lot more of individual shows this year with the player review series. So that's just kind of a little programming note that you'll see. Another programming note is this upcoming Monday, Gary will be on the show, but the following 2, he will not. Those will be player review series shows with just myself, as I will be in Savannah for about a week. So you guys will be seeing all of those shows on your feed every single day. The playoffs are here for basically, I mean, there's a couple of things going on that I find interesting, and we'll start in the league that the Pirates are in. Pirates pretty much guaranteed to be the 4th worst team in the National League unless they jump the Cincinnati Reds, who they trail by a game and a half. Very possible, because I don't think Milwaukee and or the Yankees really have much to play for, especially the Yankees, because if they win tonight against Baltimore, they clinch the AL East. But in the National League, Dodgers right now with a slim lead on that #1 seed right now in the National League at 93 and 63. The Phillies trailing right behind them at 93 and 64. And Milwaukee at 89 and 67, rounding out the division winners who have all already pretty much clinched their divisions. The New York Met or the San Diego Padres right now clearly in line to be the number one wild card team at the moment. The New York Mets, who have had quite the year in baseball this season. The New York Mets, obviously, Grimace throwing out the first pitch kind of turned their season around. Kind of a weird, odd year for them because, I mean, you lose Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom and all these other guys that they brought in. And now Francisco Lindor has had a phenomenal year. You look at Pete Alonso, who's in a free agent year, having a pretty solid year as well. So they've cemented themselves in there. Then you have Arizona as the last wild card team at 87-70. And right now, there's one team outside of the playoffs that has a chance, and that is the Atlanta Braves at a game and a half back. Very interesting because you're looking at who these teams play. The Cubbies play the Phillies. Interesting series. But for the Braves, probably the nail in the straw is going to come out. The decision will be made because they play the New York Mets at home today, I believe tomorrow and Thursday. So a big series that will likely decide who gets in there. Arizona as well, still in that mix, but between those two NL East squads, that's basically going to be who decides one of those two spots, because I think Arizona will still get in there. Atlanta and Mets, though, that's a series to watch if you want to watch it. Meanwhile, we head to the American League. New York Yankees likely to be the best team in the American League and be the number one seed. Cleveland at number 2 and Houston at number 3. That will stay that way in all likelihood unless some drastic things happen. Baltimore at 86-70, likely to be the top wild card team. Of course, the closest team to them, the surging Detroit Tigers, who are on a 3-game winning streak and 8-2 in their last 10 and have overtaken the Minnesota Twins and the Kansas City Royals. Those same Kansas City Royals who currently possess the final wild card spot, looking for their first postseason berth since 2015. Minnesota, by the way, 81-75, 1 game back. Seattle, 81-76, a game and a half back. So a lot to still determine right now in the American League. And really interesting with all this is just the matchups that we have the potential to see here. In round 1 in the National League, if things were to stand like they are, you'd have Brewers versus Diamondbacks. Very fun series there that has a lot of potential between two teams that aren't super high spending teams. And then you have 2 high spending teams in San Diego and the Mets that would go at it in a 3-game wild card. Houston and Kansas City would be the first round wild card matchup in the American League, along with Baltimore and Detroit. Baltimore and Detroit, a fun one, especially if you get Skubal pitching in game 1 against the Baltimore Orioles in a playoff series. Folks, that has a ton of potential. What else has a ton of potential is this show, because you guys have grown this show so much this year with me. I really appreciate it every time that you tune into Locked On Pirates. Don't forget, follow Locked On Pirates on Twitter at Locked On Pirates. Follow me at MVP_Ethan. Find the show on YouTube and all of your favorite podcast platforms on audio like Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. This show is available to you every Monday through Friday, free and available to you, of course. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday evening. See you tomorrow. But until then, see you on the flip side.